Welcome everyone to the City Council endorsement interview process. We are talking to folks in District or Ward 3, which is centralish Tucson, a little to the north. We are here with candidates Lucy LiBosha, who's an independent, Kevin Dahl, who is a Democrat, and Alan Harwell, who is the Republican candidate running in this race. My name is Sarah Garrett Gasson. I'm the opinion editor at the Arizona Daily Star, and I'm here with Sarah Brown, who is our opinion coordinator, and will be doing the administrative muting, unmuting, those sort of things. And Jill Jordan Spitz is here, and she is our top newsroom leader. So what we're going to do is I have some questions. I know all of you have some questions, and the way to do that is to put your questions in the chat. What we're going to do, those questions will come to me, and because there's often duplication, themes that people are interested in, I will keep an eye on those and ask them of our candidates. So we don't have a 30-second, 15-second sort of rule. I think conversations are much more productive. So what we're going to do is everyone will get to do an opening statement and a closing statement. And my request is that we keep it brief, keep it on topic. And if you see me going like this, that means it's time to wrap it up, because I am timing it, and we'll do my best to make sure that everyone has the same amount of time to share your views. So with that in mind, Ms. LiBosha, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely, no problem with that. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sarah. Hello, Tucson. My name is Lucy LiBosha. I'm a high school math teacher, a former Army paratrooper, and a longtime advocate and friend of the community. After the military and earning my master's in art education, I moved to Arizona and have been here for 20 years. I've taught in Nogales, Sunnyside, and TUSD, where I currently work with long-term suspended students. And so I have always been passionate about helping people and serving my community. I'm a former BICUS board member. I served on Tucson's Complete Streets Coordinating Committee, and I also volunteered for several different candidates and initiatives over the years in Tucson. So my run for city council is a natural progression of this work, because I've seen that for too long, the city has neglected people and businesses that give Tucson its character. I'd like to change that. And so over the last few months, I've discovered that running for office is a lot like jumping out of airplanes. And so campaigning is so similar to that type of leap that I experienced as an airborne paratrooper, where my passion, my drive, and faith for the greater good drove me through unbounding limitations and obstacles. And so you know that when elected, I don't intend to just talk about our needs. I intend to fight for them. And I intend to fight for each and every one of you, because I know that all of our problems are unique and deserve special attention. I see the disparities that persist within the 6 wards of Tucson. But more importantly, I have the courage to speak up and to break the cycle that keeps letting the problems of our city get overlooked, not just in Ward 3, but in every sector of Tucson. And so my platform is to invest in people, connect with neighborhoods, and uplift Tucson. We can't lead from the top down. We have to lead from the bottom up. And I intend to do that. And so thank you for your vote. Thank you for your support. And thank you for your courage to stand up for the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dahl, a few opening words from you, please.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Dahl, a lifelong Democrat. I've made climate change, fighting it, and implementing programs to mitigate and adapt to its impacts the foremost topic of my campaign. As we knock doors and make calls, we get good feedback from both young and old that this is a priority for a lot of people. As a longtime conservationist and community leader, I've learned a lot about the pressing environmental issues we face, not just climate change, but clean and affordable water, clean air, protecting the fragile Sonoran Desert, and how these issues affect the underrepresented members of our community the most. I've seen how inclusion, building coalitions, finding resources, careful research, and listening are important elements to achieving success. And I've done this work with some groups you probably know. I was executive director of Native Seed Search. I was also executive director of Tucson Audubon Society. For the last decade, I've been the local state representative for National Parks Conservation Association. But because of this career focus, some have tried to pigeonhole me as a one-issue candidate, though I can't think of the environment as one issue. But like all of us, my work, my life, my concerns have been much more than just my career and have also prepared me for serving the city. Just ask my wife, Bam Miller, a retired special education teacher, and I have lived in Ward 3 for 38 years. For the last 8 years, she's been president of our Samos Neighborhood Association and has involved me in every sort of project you can imagine, from traffic calming installations, planting and pruning trees, taking measures to reduce crime. I was well prepared when I started in February to knock on doors and talk to residents by phone. I can talk, for instance, about potholes, illegal dumping, 5G towers, road widenings. My vision for Ward 3 is to be responsive and super helpful for residents, to have ward staff who do the same. We need to bolster existing neighborhood associations and support the recreation of neighborhood associations in areas where they've gone dormant. The path forward must include climate-friendly, sustainable jobs, weatherizing homes, installing solar. It must include support for locally owned businesses, organized labor, keeping rents affordable, and providing more resources for home ownership. We need to invest in.
I'm going to cut you off right there because we're going to be talking about a bunch of priorities, and I want to make sure we have about the same amount of time for each candidate in your opening statement. So,
Okay.
Mr. Harwell, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, growing up in Tucson, I've seen it change a lot. I've seen the corruption rise even more in City Hall. But what you don't see are the TV and the news stations talking about our corruption. The problem is there's no accountability, no checks and balances are there in City Hall. We need an auditor to come in and see where our money's going from our roads. The gas tax the tax on the gas, all of it. We got to find out where it's going. We got to find out where the state taxes are going towards the schools. They asked for the Red for Ed. That's one. They're getting billions of dollars from the Fed. That's another. And then now they get half the state taxes. So there's that. There's lots of issues wrong with Tucson besides the road. The one issue that people like to ignore and just say, let's push it to the side, tell them get jobs, are the homeless. You can't help the homeless unless you have been homeless. A social worker has never usually been homeless. They've read a book to be a social worker. That's all they know is how to read a book. So you get the homeless to help the homeless. You get advocates for them, someone to speak for them, not about them. We need to get fiscal responsibility in Tucson. We need to fund our police and not defund the police. Just the threat alone is ridiculous. The police, they need confidentiality for their families. So just because he makes a mistake on the job, the wife and his kids don't need to be outed like they're just nobodies. It's wrong. Just going to his house just to say something, that's just wrong. You don't see cops going to your house just to say something because you capped one of theirs. And I'm gonna say it like that.
And you, when you say capped, what are you referring to? Shot.
When they get shot. When
Okay.
you shoot theirs or they shoot you. When a cop shoots a person, everybody wants to go to his house and riot. But God forbid you shoot the cop, they don't go to your house and riot. They don't threaten to kill your whole family.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you there so we can be about even on our time. So our first question is, what do you think of the city of Tucson's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic? And Mr. Dahl, let's start with you.
Thanks. I have to give a lot of kudos to the mayor and the council for taking early action. In response to this pandemic, we need to follow the medical science, and it's evolved. At first, we were using a lot of we were washing our groceries and making sure our shoes didn't come in our home, but we know it's aerosol distributed. Wearing masks and getting vaccinations are the way to go. And the city leaped in quickly, providing vaccinations before the federal money was available to pay for that. It's been repaid. And the mask mandate is absolutely important. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Harwell. You need to unmute.
The city's done terrible. Our mayor's done terrible. Our manager's done terrible. Our chief is terrible. For one, you don't defund the police when you're letting criminals out of jail during a situation like that.
Sir, our question is about
yeah,
COVID.
I know what the question
Okay.
is. I'm getting to it because this all has to do with COVID and the
Okay.
time they were in charge. And another thing, you don't say that the hospitals are full. Most of the morgue beds, there's mostly 4 beds in a morgue. All right, so that's a car crash with 2 people in it. They both die. There, you got the morgue full.
I don't know that that's actually true, sir.
Well, check it out. Another one. She done terrible by locking us down, telling us to shop at all the big businesses, and that's gonna help us out here? Nah, she's done bad.
Who is she?
Romero.
Okay.
That's the she. There's no other she there, really. She's the main one.
Just want to be
She called
clear.
the shots, and it's obvious. It's obvious what goes on in City Hall. And it's obvious how she's taking COVID and ran with it. We shouldn't have to put masks on for the rest of our life or take a vaccine that hasn't been tried, tested amongst true science, not just what the news is saying is science. Fauci has followed back on his
Okay,
words.
sir, I'm gonna stop you there. We're running for
No, you're
city
not gonna stop me.
council. And thank you. Ms. LaBosha.
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. I am vaccinated. I believe in science. This is at least 100-plus-year-old scenario situation. I'm an educator. The population and herd community is extremely important, and it's the science. It's just a no-brainer situation in our society. So I do support the mandates that have been placed. Unfortunately, it's been so politicized to such a degree that we've come down to this, and that's unfortunate. But it's important that we are as healthy and we are able to thrive given what's necessary during this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Along with the COVID, I think the overall handling of it, one of the things that's been very controversial is the city council, the mayor and city council wanting to require Tucson police, fire department, and other employees be vaccinated, or if they're not, be tested with frequent regularity. What do you think about that? And if you're opposed to it, what would you do instead to mitigate the COVID risk from public facing employees? And Mr. Harwell, you are up first.
What I would do is tell the truth about behind COVID, not so much where it came from or none of that right now, but the truth of the vaccinations, the truth of how the masks truly don't work, and not mandate them. You ask the people. You give us a choice, we might do it for you. You gave us a choice back in March, as in the government gave us a choice back in last March, whatever. Early on, said close for 30 days. We closed. And then you all didn't want to open back up.
Who is the city council?
City councils, mayors, everywhere. When you don't want to open back up, you screw us in the end. The cops, we're having them wear masks on a mandate. You're going to lose more cops.
We're asking about the vaccination requirement.
Vaccination? I'm not for it. No. Why should I be forced to take a vaccination if I can say no to rape? I can say no to sex, can't I?
Okay, sir, please mute him. Thank you.
Mute me.
Let's see, I think we are Ms. Labosha.
Thank you again. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
In terms of city employees having to have a mask mandate and also vaccination, I am in support of. Again, this is a 100-plus-year-old scenario. We're a civilized, community. We use science, we use history, we use what's worked before, and it's a no-brainer in my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Dahl.
Yeah, I support mandatory vaccinations in every situation, except where a doctor confirms that someone is not physically able to accept the vaccination. But so most of us should be vaccinated, and it's great that the city tried to mandate that. Our hands may be tied by the state, which is doing some horrible policies in this area. One thing we should look at is requiring higher insurance premiums for anyone on city staff who refuses to be vaccinated, because there's a direct connection. The hospitals are filling up with people who are getting COVID who are unvaccinated, and we have to change that. We need to turn that tide. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Please feel free to send me more message requests for questions in the chat. We do have a question from a reader. What is your position on creating a climate action plan similar to the one in development in Phoenix? And I think we are, Ms. Labosha, you are up first.
Okay, can you all hear me? Yes, okay, thank you. Thanks, Sarah, for the question. When I look at my community and when I had an opportunity to actually go out into the communities and look at different parks and look at different environments, and what was really, really clear are some of the discrepancies even within Ward 3. There's some neighborhoods, for example, that are abundant with trees and green space and with an infrastructure that's a lot more supportive from literally from neighborhood to neighborhood. And so having that equity, being able to combine our need for looking at climate change from a social justice perspective is so crucial, because even within our ward, even within the city of Tucson's, that issue of equity is pretty, just from observing, it's pretty obvious that there are some issues of equity. And so when we look at just green space, for example, and the inequities that exist between the neighborhoods within the wards, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing in terms of being able to really to address climate change from an equitable perspective. And that's really, really important, because I shouldn't go to a neighborhood like Barrio Blue Moon, for example, and see no trees or see no grass or see brown grass. And then I may go to another neighborhood such as Limberlost Park, where they're the beautiful the mesquites and the greenery and so those issues of inequity really impact climate change within the wards, and that's an issue that I intend to address.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl.
I completely agree with Ms. Labosha. It is an equity issue, and I've seen the same things. The low-income neighborhoods are hotter. We can see them on a heat map, and they don't have the vegetation they need. And so that's an important part of mitigating and adapting to climate change is to create those green spaces, the pocket parks like Limberlost Park. I used to live across the street from it. My friend Michael Ray was very involved in making that a safe space as well as a beautiful space. We need bus stops that have that shade. More, in addition, we need to just fight climate change by reducing our carbon output. Transportation is the biggest sector, and we need to have a 21st century transportation plan. I bet we'll talk about that as well, but one that recognizes that we need to wean ourselves from fossil fuels, and we need to get people from places to places in a delightful, cool way, whether they're pedestrians, bicyclists, or using electric vehicles. There's so many things we can do on climate change, and that's the most exciting thing to me coming onto the city council, is to jump in and get those details of weatherizing homes and installing solar and putting in ordinances that makes it easier for people to prepare for the heat that's coming. You know, I noticed in your newspaper in the last month, almost every day, not this morning, has been an article about climate change. And Dr. Richard Carmona's op-ed on Monday was particularly inspiring. He says, climate change is harming the health of Arizonans. It's costing lives, costing our economy, and endangering our future. We have to take this seriously. Thank you.
Mr. Harwell, the climate action plan, similar to Phoenix.
First of all, you gotta look at making sure it works correctly, making sure there's no wasted money. And for another one, to water your grass, that's a personal issue. You can't force people to water their own grass. So you're gonna either make a law forcing people to water the grass so it's not brown, or you're not. Another one, trees, that's decided by the landlord and the people that live there. If you got trees in your yard, that's a property. The property owners decide the tree, not the city.
What about in park? She was referring to parks or medians, you know, public space, not someone's home.
If you're gonna get down on parks, we need bike parks and skate parks inside the parks for kids to play in. Why? You build it, they will come. Get these kids out of these houses. Let them play at the park. Why is it so bad to have stuff like that? But everybody's jumping on the dog parks. Let's see how often these dog parks get used. I don't hate on dog parks. I love my dogs, but we walk our dogs around. We don't just go to the park and sit there. And it's no dogging them people either. It's just how it is. Everybody has a personal choice to do whatever they want. Planting trees, dog parks, a park, that's it. But bike parks are the best thing for parks to have. Skate parks are the best things for parks to have. And not another. And the zoo should not take part of the Reed Park.
Okay. So
Reed Park and that golf course and turn it into a lake, or into not a lake, a safari for the animals, the herbivores, elephants, giraffes, every leaf-eating animal needs to live there.
okay.
That way you could drive around it or you could drive through it.
Thank you very much.
Driven by the zoo.
Okay, let's see. The question is so I have a question about the Proposition 206 that's on the ballot, the minimum wage proposition that would, just as a reminder, would increase the minimum wage within the city of Tucson over the course of, I think, 2.5, 3 years. So it wouldn't be up immediately. It would be incremental. So I think, Mr. Harwell, you're up first. What are your thoughts on Proposition 206 and the minimum wage?
Besides it being a racketeering scheme for the city and special interest groups, say an employee wants to sue the company, he can, it doesn't even have to be him. Say he doesn't want to sue it. It could be an interested party. So it could be someone off the side of the street or a friend that knows them or a relative that decides to sue. Why is that wrong? You tell me, why is it?
I'm not
asking
making
you.
the connection between what you're saying and the Proposition 206 with the minimum wage.
All right, have you read Proposition 206,
Yes, I have several times.
the whole complete pack,
Yep.
not just the $15 part?
Nope.
Okay, so why is it okay for special interest groups and or people outside that employ to even sue?
I'm not answering the
asking you in
question.
general.
I'm curious what you think. Do you support the proposition or
I
no?
don't support it one bit. The
Okay.
city should not be involved in what they're doing. There should not be another labor department. We should not be, where is it? Telling people that they should pay other people under the table.
I don't
You
think
want
that's
that
what it
everybody-
says.
It
But-
doesn't say it by words. It doesn't say it in the words, but yes, it does.
Well, I think we can only go by what's.
I've talked to
text in front of
lawyers.
the
I've
voter.
had lawyers talk
So
about
I'm
this.
going to move now to Ms. LiBosha.
This will get you.
Thank
it is-
you. Please go ahead, Ms. LaBosha.
Thank you, Sarah. I actually worked on Prop 206 back in 2016. And I worked with the proponents and the infrastructure that was in place back then. So I've been a long time supporter of Prop 206 minimum wage increase. Truth of the matter is a $15, once we reach that $15 an hour per hour for an employee, it still does not address, the fact that folks are still living below minimum wage. And so it's a no-brainer. As an educator, as someone who has students and families who often depend on those minimum wage jobs to survive, it's a no-brainer. It's about being able to save and you don't even have that opportunity even at $15 an hour to save, but it's still an opportunity to get closer to being able to reach, to be able to have a home eventually, to be able to save, to be able to provide for some basic necessities in our community. And without doubt, I'm also, I endorse the current Fight for 15 for the exact same reasons that I did 4 years ago.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, Proposition 206.
I too support it strongly. I circulated the petition and got signatures for it. I'm urging voters to vote for it. I hope you'll all vote for it. The issue is you should make a good living wage for work done. And if an employer can't afford, or maybe they should be doing something else. I've talked to a lot of small business people. There are some, like in Tim Steller's column, there are some small concerns. Maybe those can get ironed out, but the overriding important issue is that we need this minimum wage in our city. The city already does that for city workers. This would do it for everybody in Tucson. One concern was that businesses in the county would have a slight advantage. Well, that means that the county should pass a similar measure, and there's a chance that they will do that as well. I support Prop 206.
We have a question. Do you think the City of Tucson Parks and Rec is adequately funded? And what can mayor and council do to increase the funding to Parks and Rec to maintain the parks? And how most of the Parks and Rec funding these days is about building capital projects inside the parks rather than maintenance of green space. And Mr. Dahl, I think you're up first. Actually,
No.
I think
No.
Ms. Oh, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, the Tucson Parks and Rec is not adequately funded. We might say that about a lot of departments in the city. The city is underfunded, but the Tucson Parks and Recreation Department is below the national average for the funding for the people they serve. If you look at the map of where parks are, there are underserved neighborhoods in Ward 3. Access to parks is very important for childhood recreation, for adult recreation programs, for programs where people learn about things, and for just an opportunity to get outside and breathe. So how do we achieve more funding? Well, it's always a balance, and it's looking for money wherever we can, not only within the normal city revenue streams, but through grants from nonprofits, from federal programs. I spent a couple of years working for Pima County Parks and Rec, and I'm really committed to that part of government. It provides a very important resource for our residents, and we should support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Labosha. I think I got the order wrong, and I apologize for that.
And so, yeah, I definitely, I grew up on the East Coast, and got to tell you, my lifeline was being able to, as a teenager, go to a recreation center where the adults were responsible adults and taking care of you know, the needs of teenagers, you know, as teenagers are and young people are. And so having that space is definitely crucial to our society, right? And how we help to raise children. And so I would definitely agree that it's underfunded. And so that it goes back to that argument. It goes back to our platform in investing, connecting, and uplifting Tucson. It's being able to reallocate those already available resources for what's really necessary in our society to be productive, and investing in our futures, investing in what children do after school. And so absolutely, along with there's lots of collaboration with between Pima County as well. So there's always that potential, but definitely tapping into the resources that we already have is crucial. It makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Harwell, your thoughts about is Parks and Recreation adequately funded? And what do you think about maintenance in parks?
I think it could do better, or the city could do better for them, for the department, because when you go to certain parks and there's weeds and vines of weeds growing up the fences, cracks on the tennis courts, all the way across, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, concrete doesn't crack easily, which means there's a thin slab put down, and probably didn't have rebar in it. So we could do better. We need to, like I said earlier, build more skate parks, build these skate parks and bike parks, and they'll be full of kids. Okay. If you put leagues together for them, if you do a zoo safari, you'll rank in the money.
Okay.
You'll get people to come to Tucson just to see that.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts on parks. With another issue that is facing Tucson across the board is water security. And I'm wondering what your thoughts and ideas are about how to ensure water security for the future, and also what within that, what is your primary concern about water in Tucson? And Mr. Harwell, you're up first.
Primary concern is when the Colorado River project runs up.
Okay.
That's a concern, because then we're gonna have to rely on aqueducts and what we got left. And after that, we ain't got nothing. We can only suck so much out of that aqueduct before we keep sinking into a deeper and deeper hole here. Tucson sits on water, and if there's not enough pressure in there, we're gonna fall through one day. And if we build too much here, we will.
You mean like a sinkhole?
Yeah, it can collapse. Anything can collapse if there's a vacant hole there. You got to have pressure there. We've sunk before. Not just that long ago, they had to stop pumping.
Okay.
We can't be building, so we don't need no skyscrapers in Tucson. You don't need, the more concrete we have here, the hotter it gets and the more water we're gonna drink. I'm not telling people that they can't come here, but that's kind of the gist of it. But that's how it has to be. Tucson used to be a vacation place. Now it's not. Now we're a big city. We used to worry about the main demographic of the elderly. Now we have like 15 different demographics.
Okay, thank you very
We
much.
don't do what we need to do. We don't.
Okay, Ms. Labosha. Water.
Thank you, Sarah. Admittedly, I am not the expert on water, but I'm smart enough to surround myself with as your next city councilwoman, I would be smart enough to surround myself with experts in this issue. I am aware that we are all aware that climate change is a big factor to our water woes. I totally agree that how we can look at PFAS blooms that are plaguing our groundwater, looking at taking advantage through education of rainwater, being able to renovate green structures and homes. There's just so many ways in which we can decide, but there's this resistance between, I think, big business and what's necessary and us moving forward. And so it really is about coming together and having that collaboration so that we can really pinpoint what's really necessary for our future beyond, my years on this earth, beyond our years on this earth, for our future. So we really need to take advantage of rainwater. And there has to be wealth of resources that are out there that's free. We need to create infrastructure starting at the neighborhood levels and expanding that throughout the city so that we can increase our water reserves, because the Colorado, it's pretty dire. And I'm not sure if most folks really understand, but that would also be our job as city council, is making sure that kind of information is communicated, and then that the actions that are in play. I think we need to sacrifice a little bit today so that we can think about tomorrow's future.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, water.
Yeah, water is a huge issue to a desert city, especially when climate change is threatening our major source, the Colorado River. We have such great opportunities because the city owns the water company, and there are some policies that we can do to help out right away. One thing, we can rein in delivering water outside of the city boundaries. We need to be concerned for the city. People outside of the city can do things creatively, like friends of mine have done, and build homes that are supplied entirely on harvested rainwater. By the way, 30% of our potable water is used outside for landscaping, and that needs to change. And water harvesting is the way to do it. We all experienced a great June. If that water that fell on your property could have been retained, and I wish I could have retained more of it, that could supply your outdoor needs for the rest of the year. We only have 5 years of stored CAP water. If something happens and we're at the end of the CAP canal and we use that up, our backup is going back to what we did before the CAP and using underground aquifer water. And it's real concerning to me that toxic chemicals, PFAs, and others are showing up from past industries. Those absolutely need to be cleaned up, and the cost should not be borne by the residents of the southern part of the city where it's showing up. It should be borne by the industries and the federal government that caused those. We can also put in procedures for new construction to be ready to do water harvesting and to conserve water. So when I'm elected, water will be a big issue for me. Thank you.
Thank you. A question that has been big in our letters to the editor and just around the community is the TEP proposal to put the very, very, very tall power lines through some historic neighborhoods. I shouldn't say historic because all of Tucson is historic, but through neighborhoods. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, on the process, and what steps you would take as a city council person to find a solution to this issue. And Mr. Dahl, you are up first.
Yeah, thank you. I live just north of Grant, so this has been an issue for my neighborhood from the get-go. As one of the alignments goes, about a block and a half from my house, and so I've watched it really carefully. Other communities require this sort of utility to be underground, and I think it's very reasonable for us to require that through most of the alignments that we're talking about. Maybe there's some room for negotiation. Maybe there's some parts of Campbell Keno corridor where it's not as essential as it is right next to the university and the neighborhoods immediately adjacent to the university. So it's a matter of cost. Who's going to pay for the cost? And should it be these neighborhoods? No, it should be the people who are benefiting from this electricity. I want to give a lot of props to Council Member Steve Kozachek for jumping on this issue, researching it deeply, and coming up with some creative ideas and keeping the utilities coming to the table to resolve this. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up. You said that the people who should pay for it to be put underground as a possibility shouldn't be the ones to pay for it, that it should be the people who use electricity. So are you saying that the cost should be borne across the board for everyone?
It's designed mostly to supply the University of Arizona. They should take the bulk of the cost, and TEP. So it's some of it's going to other customers, and TEP should be the mechanism for distributing that cost.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Ms. Labosha.
So my position, thank you for the question again, Sarah. My position is that in any cases where a new TEP line is going to be a blight, that utility must go underground, especially around neighborhoods. And so on the other hand, it makes sense for the lines to go above ground when they cross industrial areas like Keno Parkway, and above ground makes sense, a lot makes sense. But my main concern is protecting the charm and views of neighborhoods and being appropriate and how we update our infrastructure. And so I've been following this issue closely because I appreciate it so much. Neighbors that have reached out to me from Jefferson Park, they really are organized and they raised hell, about issues and concerns on this issue. And so they've lobbied with surrounding neighborhoods and the city council, and I fully support and unite with their demands to place the lines underground. And so these power lines were largely created to support new and transient residents like student housing developments at the U of A. And so, yes, they should bear most of the cost.
Thank you. Mr. Harwell, your thoughts on the TEP power line proposal and the process?
I don't like the power lines. I don't like the 5G. I believe all wires, all these poles need to go underground. Pure and simple, end of question. If you're going to take power, straight to the house. If you're going to take a 5G, straight to the house. You don't need it broadcasting across waves. You don't need it to do that. So those towers need to go.
Okay. So we have a question. What role do you think childcare plays in the economic development of the city? And what can mayor and council do to support childcare providers and families who are being priced out and aren't able to go back to work because they can't afford to? Mr. Harwell, I think you are up first.
I know there's lots of jobs hiring. So when it comes to work, there's work out there. But when you're getting paid to stay home, that don't help either. Just because it ain't called that, it is. Another one.
What are you referring?
Huh?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. Please go ahead.
Childcare, every parent needs childcare at one point in their being a parent. Everyone does. It's not like they don't. Either it's going to be a family member or not. But it does need to be. When I was a baby, they set it by my mom's income. So that's all I know about it. And I don't think it should be free, because then it does fall back on the taxpayer. If we're not being charged for our taxes straight out, we're being charged at the store for them somehow.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Ms. Labosha, childcare.
Thank you, Sarah. So as long as there are inequities, financial inequities, as long as there's inequities in terms of the pay, living wage, I can't imagine people wanting to go without water, wanting to go without food, wanting to go without shelter and clothing. As long as those inequities are unaddressed, which I do believe is the city council's has a huge role in that. As long as those inequities are unaddressed, then this conversation needs to keep happening. This conversation in terms of what the city council's role is needs to keep happening. And so, yeah, the city council voted, back in June, I believe, a few months ago, to raise the minimum wage for their minimum wage earners, to $15 an hour. And so I would think that the city council would be on board and with the fight for 15, which would impact almost 90,000 minimum wage earners in Tucson. And so we've got to address, just the imbalances, the inequities, the financial inequities, the financial caste system, if you will, that exists in our city. Folks are not wanting to go hungry. Folks are not wanting to not have housing and shelter and clothing and all those things, in addition to healthcare. So
Do you think that there is a role for the Tucson City Council to use taxpayer dollars to help families afford childcare?
Childcare is not, when I'm a parent, my children are all adults, but even 30 years ago, I remember childcare not being pretty pricey. And again, we're 30 years, today, you cannot, when you're looking at $12 an hour, and folks are just not, we don't live in a society that can really support, childcare, housing, a car expense, all of these other expenses. And if we are trying to have a sustainable society in which people are wanting to work and are willing to work, why not be a part of that component in terms of city council?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dahl, your thoughts on childcare and using tax dollars to help families afford it?
First off, kudos to the Star for your special reporting on this issue. It was illuminating. It's surprising how expensive child care has become. This was an issue for my wife and I. We both worked when my son was younger, and we had to find child care that we trusted. It's a huge expense and a huge impact on working families, especially those marginal in their economics. Tucson does have an important role. Through the Parks Department, we have KidCo, which at various facilities provides after-school care for children, helping people stay at work. That can expand and go to other areas and take in more children. This is an investment in our community. Tax dollars can, and we can get federal grants and recruit other money to support this, so that it's subsidized for people who cannot afford current market prices for childcare, so they can keep working. This is an investment in our community so that people can stay at work. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question. Last September, the city passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency, resolving to bring carbon emissions to net zero by 2030. Do you support the community choice energy for Tucson, where city could buy renewably generated electricity wholesale, which would break TEP's monopoly and speed the transition to cleaner energy? And I think that Ms. Labosha, you are up first. Yes? Oh. You are still muted.
Sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I've actually had an opportunity to meet with a few clean energy factions that are out there, and agree that there's a monopoly, agree that there should be other options. And to me, it's about 21st century mobility and addressing some of our the need for greenhouse emissions to be net zero by 2000 yesterday. And so, yes, I do support it.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl.
I too agree with this proposal. It would be great to break the monopoly of TEP. You know, TEP does generally good work, but it's so tied into fossil fuel. And I think if people had a choice, we would be using those renewable sources that have become cheaper than coal fired power plants that TEP is invested in. So yes, I wholeheartedly agree the proposal to do that.
Great, thank you. Mr. Harwell.
What was the question again?
The question is, the city last September passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency, resolving to bring carbon emissions to net zero by 2030. Do you support community choice energy for Tucson, where the city could buy renewably generated electricity wholesale, which would break TEP's monopoly and speed the transition to cleaner energy?
I wouldn't switch TEP off coal, not complete. The towers, the solar panels and the windmills, those would be a secondary. But why? What happens if we're just on those and something happens? We get dust storms out here in the desert. So you know what? It won't take long before all those the turbines to start jamming up with dust and slowing down. The glass from the solar panels to be covered in dust. You would have to have crews out there cleaning these things, maintaining them. That's even a lot. And then you got this, from what I hear, there's a huge junkyard of them somewhere in America. I can't remember what state it is, but they're a big mess to have. When they break, they're a big mess. These things are huge.
Okay.
I don't want to see one in my backyard.
Thank you very much. We are coming down to our to the wire, so I'm going to go ahead and give each candidate a time to make a closing statement. And we will start with Mr. Dahl.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to the editors, the publisher, the Star. Hey, I encourage you to check out my website for more information about my campaign. Kevin Dahl, the number 4, Tucson.com. Check out my list of supporters. I'm especially proud to have Congressman Raul Grijalva, who's been a mentor of mine, as a strong supporter with a video endorsement, but also Pima County Chair Sharon Bronson, the current City Council member Karen Ulick, and more than 400 people are listed as endorsers. I've also been endorsed by several labor unions. I'm running this race because I want to make a difference. I want to lead with climate change, but I just love Tucson. My niece was knocking on doors for me early on, and which I thought was great to have a young person in my family doing that. And I asked her why, and she said, well, Uncle Kevin, you're the only person I've ever heard say that Tucson is a paradise. And you said that without any irony in your voice. I really love it here, and I would feel honored and grateful to represent the city of Tucson as a city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harwell, your closing statement.
Look up Agenda 2030. Why? Because it depicts everything we're going through now, down to our roads, why they're crumbling, why there's defund the police. That tells us why we're at where we are now. We have Marxist activists running through the streets, universities training people to hate America, to act a fool. Schools, our K through 12 are teaching kids to be activists. You get a grade just because you're an activist? No. You get a grade for learning. Our kids should know the Constitution. like the back of their hand. They should know the Declaration like the back of their hand. They should know the Arizona State Constitution like the back of their hand, and our town charter, to know why we're screwed up like this and why we shouldn't be screwed up like this. Those need to happen here. We need a police chief that needs to be elected. We need a city manager that needs to be elected. We need a new mayor. We need a new council. Thank you. Thanks for your support. Alan Harwell for citycouncil.com.
Thank you very much. Ms. LiBosha, your closing statement.
So thank you, Sarah, again. And thank you
Your
to
video,
the,
I'm sorry, your video is off. I don't know if that's on purpose.
that is not intentional. Okay, so thank you, Sarah, again, and thank you to the Arizona Daily Start for this opportunity. As an educator, an active community member, and now as a political candidate, I understand that change is disruptive, it's uncomfortable, and it's challenging, but change is necessary. And so real leadership and power is how we enter the world with intentionality. And so it's wrapped into the responsibilities that we take in, right? And so I'm running for Ward 3 because for too long, poverty and crime have become normalized in Tucson, and that's not acceptable. And so on the campaign trail, I heard from so many neighbors and business owners how vandalism and theft is a constant issue. And so if we put our resources in the right place, if we govern responsibly, we can fix the issues that have plagued Tucson for decades. And so we need more access to transportation, access to affordable housing and clean public restrooms. We need to listen to our neighbors and neighborhood associations and work collaboratively to spend our tax dollars. There isn't enough access to the programs meant to respond to the issues surrounding mental health care, substance abuse, and homelessness. And these issues create the conditions of poverty and crime to exist. And so our city resources are generated by taxpayer dollars. And so we need to finally use those resources in a way that tackles long-standing problems in our city. And so my campaign promises to invest, connect, and uplift Tucson. We will unite with our unique and diverse communities together. So finding common solutions for our shared common needs. And so we're grassroots, I'm working class, we're endorsed by the people. Please check out my website, Lucy4 citycouncil.com and definitely feel free to reach out to me personally. We can have a conversation and I want to hear from you. So again, so much thank you, Arizona Star. Thank you so much, Tucson, for your vote and for your support.
Great. Thank you so much for everyone who joined and shared the candidates, for sharing your thoughts and priorities, and to the readers who tuned in. This will be available online at tucson.com. And once Sarah works her video magic and posts it, and we have another one coming up tomorrow. That's going to be Proposition 206, and it's going to be at 3:30. So hope to see some familiar faces there. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.